to fun scale models. This series is focusing on building the fun scale Park Flyer P-40C Tomahawk. We'll be continuing construction of the fuselage in this episode. With the left half done, we'll go ahead and remove it from the building board. So with the fuselage removed from the board, we're going to take a quick look on the back side here. Make sure that if we need to do any sanding and clean up any leftover wax paper, we can do that. Looking at the plans, we still have to attach F2A to F2. And at the plans, the F2A is behind F2. So what I'll be doing is, in preparation for gluing the other halves of the fuselage formers on, as you can see here, I've lined up this, and the hole, and then confirming I do have it on the back side there. So you can use on a larger model, you can use wood glue, you can use even epoxy if need be. Because this model is not going to have a huge motor in it, I'm going to just CA it in place. So let's go ahead and move this out of the way. And I did put a pretty liberal amount on there. This will also assist us in when we're attaching this to the other half of the fuselage. While that's drying, I also want to do the mount for the motor. So you can see in here, I've already pre-marked it. So I'm going to hold it in place, the motor mount in place with one of these clamps. As you can see here, I've lined it up with the marks I had previously added, and I'm going to drill out that mounting hole. One other thing to take in consideration when doing your final orientation of the motor mount is where the set screws are. So there's two set screws on this particular mount. Really only need one, but I want to make sure that it's easily accessible. So if I were to continually to turn this, there's different positions where this set screw will end up. I want to use where it's at right now. The reason being is I can put a small little scrap piece of balsa here that I can put my Allen head through if I ever need to take the motor out once I've installed it. You might not be able to see as easily on this camera, but I've marked it. My pin vise with a 1/16 inch bit. Now once I glue the other half on, I'll have to re-drill this hole, but it gives us a good starting point. And just coming through on the other side. So now, I mentioned these in a previous video, we're going to use these screws to mount the motor. Grabbing my multiple screwdriver set here. And so now we've got our alignment hole in there to make it easier for setup at a later point in time. An additional thing that we'll want to take in consideration before we start having the other half of the formers is the ducting. You can see it's notated on the plans right here. The intent is to allow airflow past the motor. So if you look from this angle, this is the intake, which is on the real airplane. It'll pass through and come out between the stringer here and the keel. What I'll be doing is infilling balsa from about right here to this former, and this will be an exit area. Looking at the plans here, you can also see that it's a straight piece of cardstock. So I spray painted some cardstock from the template that's included with the plans. So this will fit in just like that. And it will be pressing up against the bottom here of F2, and we'll be pushing up against the back of this former as well. This specifically cut section here is where the air comes through. Now if you wanted to, you could paint the inside of the model. I don't think it's necessarily needed. The only reason why I spray painted is if you're looking straight down the intake, you can see some sort of cardstock in there. One of the things that you'll want to do is to, before you glue this in, is double check to make sure it does this fit. And you can see there, it's just a little bit too wide. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim off a small section of this. Alright, let's go ahead and let's fit that back in there. And recheck. And now we're plenty good for spacing. So one thing we want to do, because we did drill through, there might be some wood that sort of sticks up a little bit here, so you can use any different kind of sanding pad and just make sure that you knock that back down so that it's flush. So we can look at installing F2. The one benefit of having the subformer, or the F2A, is it helps with not only alignment, but making sure that it's 90 degrees, so it's not leaning forward or aft. So want to give this a good looking over, just make sure that everything's lining up. Go ahead and drop some glue in there. I'm just tacking it at this point. I want to take a look at the bottom alignment here. Get that right. Line those up. Tack that in place. Again, looking at my top, making sure that that and that are even, which they are. So again, that's just tack gluing it in place. I'm looking at it from different angles to make sure, does it look correct? Does it look 90 degrees to this piece here? Which it does, at least from my eyeball. It is a little bit difficult to get a 90 degree in this area. You can use a smaller one, and it looks to be pretty good. So I'll go ahead and I'll put the remaining glue on this and get it secured. So now that we have F2 in place, I'm going to look at just making the final review of how this fits. So you can see that it does sort of lip underneath F2A. So we'll push that down towards the bottom. So I will I'm going to use a different kind of glue. I'm going to use PVA to glue this in place. We'll get that done and we'll come back once it's complete. So with the ducting now dry, I went ahead and I mounted the remainder of the motor mount. Using the first screw that we put in as sort of an alignment tool, I used my pen drill to go ahead and drill out those spots, put those pins in. You can also see it's a little bit difficult. I added a plastic shim here to make sure we got that 1.5 to 2 degrees side thrust. So I'm going to add the remaining stringers or remaining formers now. It's really just making sure you're getting them lined up properly. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. I just like to eyeball it for the most part, making sure that I'm at 90 degrees. See, the top there is at 90. Come down to the bottom here, line that up. And look in the center here and make sure those two are set up. So just looking at this overall, I'm happy with it, so I'm going to add a few more drops of glue. And then I'll also put some glue on the back side here to attach the ducting to this half. What I'm using is an applicator, and I've got PVA in it. So I'll just drop some PVA. So I've got F4 lined up. Make sure it's top and bottom. With all the former halves now attached to the fuselage, it's time to start working on the stringers. So what I've done is I've trimmed up a short piece of 3/32 stringer. I'm going to put it right underneath the stringer location on F2. Tack that in place. Now the one nice thing about it is F2 is pretty sturdy, so what I can do is I can use this stringer, now that it's glued in, to make sure that this is exactly straight across. Do that by running a ruler. So I've tacked that. And now I can run a ruler, or running a stringer all the way from the rear to the front. I'll do that now. Next stringer down. That's soak in. Looks good. Those are in alignment. That was good. That looks good too. Wouldn't ordinarily glue with my hand underneath there in case there's anything dropped off, so a bit of a safety tip there. I'm just doing it because we got the camera. These are all looking just fine. Okay, so add that one there. And then this is where we need the scrap piece. I'm going to slide that underneath. That's too much, actually. Take a little bit off the top there. Take a little bit more. And it's just, again, fine-tuning it to make sure that it fits best. That looks good. that's a much better fit. So I'm going to drop glue in here. There's a bit of a gap, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up. I've now added all the stringers to the other half of the fuselage, with the exception of the top two ones here. We'll add those in just a little while. The next step would be to add the wing saddles. So one of the things I'll look at whenever I have parts like this that are facing the outside is the orientation of the markings on it. So I'd like to try and keep these on the inside if I can. Unfortunately, they are mirrors of each other, so I can put one on each side and not have the marking on the exterior. So these go right in here. They fit pretty well. They might need a little bit of adjustment here, but if you look at this end, it's open. So looking at the plans here, we see there's another subformer, and that is F7A. So that goes in right back here. And really, again, just sort of eyeballing it, making sure that it's fitting properly. It doesn't. Okay. Go ahead and I'll put a little bit of glue on that to tack it in place. And I'll check it once again. Make sure that it matches up. Now, this piece here goes into the back of that, so I'm going to test fit this again just to kind of see how close I am to being correct. And that fits in quite nicely. So we'll go ahead and we'll glue this all the way in. I like to use the glue bottle as a handheld clamp sometimes because the glue is less likely to stick to this plastic than it is your fingers. So once again, let's take a look and see how our fit. Pretty good. And then this gets squeezed in to that there. So what I want to do is I'm going to glue this top line first. And I'm going to do that by tacking it on the back side. Pull that in. So this is, obviously we're bending and curving wood. We're doing it with the grain, so it's a little bit easier. If this was very, very heavy or dense wood, or if we had a very sharp curve, then one trick is to wet the outside. You can use standard water. I like to use Windex because it has a little bit of ammonia in it. But what I am going to do is, because this seems to be pliable just by my fingers, I'm going to go ahead and drop it to glue in there. And of course, making sure my finger doesn't get attached to it as well. So there's going to be a little bit of adjustment need to be here. We'll have to sand this in and blend it in, but that's not a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and lay a bead right in that area, because the intent is to interconnect the stringer structure with the wing saddle here. So I'm going to go ahead and check that. And it looks like I'm gonna be good there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll tack that into place. I'll give these joints just one more check over and see if I need to add any additional glue to them. We'll do the other side.
This concludes part 5. Please continue to follow us as we build the fuselage in future episodes. If you like the videos, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.